Hey everyone, we are doing Unit 6A packet right now, and we are starting with topic number 1. And our topic for Unit 6A is all about functions. So in topic 1, we are just talking about the definition of a function. So before we start about the definition of a function, I just want to talk about this idea of sometimes rules are fair and sometimes they're unfair. So a fair rule, if you think about fair in any way that you know it, it is just a rule that gives the same output, and you could think of an output as an answer. It gives the same output for every input. And one way that I like to think about a rule is that it is predictable, which means if a rule is fair, we should be able to predict what the output is. All right, an unfair rule is a rule that gives many different outputs for the same input. All right, so fair and unfair is just an intro into what we're really talking about, and that is what a function is. So a function is a fair rule that gives exactly one output for each input. And we'll do some examples to try to explain this when we start talking about numbers with functions. All right, so let's talk about an actual example with numbers. So here we have a rule, and our rule is add 4 to the input and square the result. So it asks if this is a function, which means is this something that's fair that will always give exactly one output for each input. So in order to do this, we have to actually test some inputs. So I'm just going to pick some random inputs. I'm going to pick -2, I'm going to pick -2, 1, and 3. And I'm just going to do this rule to them. So I'm going to start with -2. I'm going to add 4 to -2. -2 plus 4 is +2. Then I'm going to square the result. So 2 squared is 4. Now I'm going to do the same thing with 1. So I'm going to add 4 to 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. And then I'm going to square the result. 5 squared is 25. Now I'm going to do 3. 3 plus 4 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So far, every input has exactly one output. Input, output, input, output. The real way, the way that I always test a function, is I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick another input that I have already selected. What if I picked 1 again? If I pick 1 again, I'm going to add 4 to the input, that's 5. Square the result, I'll get 25. And again, this is a function because that same input I picked, 1, gave me the same output, exactly 1. There is only one output that belongs to the input of 1. So does this define a function? Over here it says answer reason. I'm just going to write that here. The answer is yes, this is a function. And the reason is each input gives one output. All right, we're going to do another one. So this rule, the next rule that we have is does the rule, and I'm going to highlight it again, find a number that is less than the input. Remember, we know what less than means. It just means smaller than. So let's just pick those same inputs, -2, 1, and 3, just random inputs. All right, so the output, I just have to think in my own head any number that is less than the input. You might be thinking of a number that is less than -2, I might be thinking of a number that is less than negative 2. Our outputs could be different. I'm going to pick any number less than negative 2. It's negative 10. Chances are you were thinking of a different number that was less than negative 2, and that could also work as an output. All right, 1, I'm going to pick any number that is less than 1. I'm going to pick 0. 3, I'm going to pick any number that is less than 3. I'm going to pick negative 100 is definitely less than 3. Now I'm going to go back and pick one that I've already picked. I'm going to pick 1. I've already picked 1 once. I'm going to rewrite it again. So if I pick 1, again, pick any number that's less than the input. This time, I don't feel like picking 0. I'm going to pick negative 2, any number I want. This right here is an example of us breaking a rule. So this is not a function. And I'm going to be really specific with my reason. I'm going to say the input of 1 gives multiple outputs. All right, so now we're going to try another example. It just says, are the tables below functions? So now we're just looking at tables. These tables already have inputs and outputs. So we already are provided inputs and outputs. And all that I'm looking is I'm going to check each row. I'm going to check that the inputs have their own output. So 1 has the output 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the thing here is that none of my inputs repeated. So I can assume that the answer is yes. And it's that each input has 1 output. Okay, let's look at the next one. Again, I'm going to go through and look at my inputs. 1 gives 3, 5 gives 2, negative 1 gives 3, 2 gives negative 6, and I'm going to circle this one, and the reason is because the input 5 repeats. And this time, 5, the last time, gave the output of 2. This time, 5 gives the output of 4. That is a no-no. So we're going to say no. The input of 5 has multiple outputs. All right, now we're going to look at some graphs. And graphs, you have to think about, so when we look at a table, our inputs are x's, our outputs are y's. They're just like coordinate points. That's the same with a graph. This is our x-axis. It is also our list of inputs. This is our y-axis. It is our list of outputs. All right, so all that we're looking for here is some time where if any inputs have multiple outputs. And I'm just going to show you an example of what that looks like. So I'm going to highlight or circle these 3 points right here. Whoops, that was too big. Let me circle that a little better so you can see. These 3 points. And I want to write the coordinates of these points. So this top point is approximately 8. And I know this graph's a little bit hard to read, but 8, comma, let's say 16. This middle point is, again, 8, comma, and this looks like maybe about 14. And this last point is 8, comma, looks like 12. Now, this is not a function. So it says is the graph a function. I'm going to write here no, and let's talk about the reason. The reason is because the input, the 8, I'm going to write the input 8, has, look at all of the different outputs. It has multiple outputs. And it just so happens that a good way to test a function is anytime that the inputs have multiple outputs, if you connect those with a vertical line, that vertical line will touch in multiple places. That's called the vertical line test. If you can draw a vertical line and it touches more than one point, that means it is not a function. And actually on this same graph, I can draw a vertical line here as well, and here, and they all go through multiple points. Those are all places that make this not a function. Those are all like the bad parts. So I want to think about this graph letter B, and let's just do that test. If I draw a vertical line like this, it only hits 1 point. If I draw another vertical line over here, it only hits 1 point. Those are all good things. There's actually, if I move that vertical line around, there is no place where it will hit multiple points, like over here. So I'm going to say this is a function, yes. Each input has 1 output. All right, let's look at C, and again, I'm going to do that vertical line test. So I'm going to draw a vertical line right here, and look, it only hits 1 point. Now I'm going to draw another one. I can pick anywhere I want. If I draw it here, look what happens. It hits here and there, which means that this input, it doesn't, let's look at where my input is, maybe 1, 2, 3, has multiple outputs. This point up here might be like 3, looks like about 3, 2, and this point is 3, negative 5. The input 3 has multiple outputs, so I'm going to say no. I'm just going to say here, some inputs have multiple outputs. And another way that you could say this, and sometimes we say this vertical line is actually called the vertical line test. I'm going to write here that it fails the vertical line test, because we might talk about that in class a little bit, the vertical line test. All right, last one, D, if you do that vertical line, if we draw it, there's a vertical line, it only hits 1 time. There's a vertical line, it only hits 1 time. This vertical line is always going to only hit 1 time. So I'm going to say yes, each input has 1 output. And I'm going to also write here, just as an idea, that it passes the vertical line test. All right, you guys are doing homework number 1 to practice these skills in your 6A packet. Good luck.